He turned off my TV in my own living room. Not an accident. Click. Black screen, his shadow standing between me and the window light like he'd paid rent on the sun. "Go to your room, old woman. This is my house now," my son-in-law said, chin up like a little boy wearing a crown from a party store. My daughter stared at the carpet the way people do when they've rehearsed polite instead of brave. Have you ever felt your name shrink in your own house? I'm Ruth from Oakland, 67 years old with a good back on most days and papers with my signature all over this lot. And that night I learned silence is the only language bullies speak. So I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I reached for my keys, my purse, and my dignity and walked out past him without asking permission from a child who confuses volume with ownership. The porch jasmine still smelled like it belonged to me. The lock clicked behind me the way it always does when a woman decides she'd rather be cold in the night air than small under her own roof. I sat in my car and wrote his exact words in the spiral notebook I keep for grocery lists and truths. Date, time, line by line. Go to your room, old woman, my house now. I wrote that my daughter looked away. I wrote where I stood, where he stood, how the TV went dark on the final Jeopardy clue, and how my hands didn't shake until I put the pen down. Have you ever felt your fear turn into ink before you could talk yourself out of believing it happened? I drove to the only place that speaks louder than men in living rooms, where paper lives. The self-help window at the courthouse doesn't judge your shoes. California has forms with teeth for when people think age makes you furniture. I signed my name where it says elder and checked the box that says move out because I have a trust, a deed, and a memory that earns interest. The clerk stamped the pages and said, "Come back at 9. And I went to sleep on my sister Velma's couch under a quilt my mother pieced from dresses that knew better men. Morning came with coffee and resolve. I put my pearls on because my mother taught me courts see better when you shine. I brought the grant deed, the trust, the tax bill with my name still holding its place, and the little notebook with his sentence underlined twice. Have you ever watched a judge read your life and feel the room finally remember the difference between my house and this house? The stamp came down like a gavel finding its rhythm. Temporary order, residence exclusion, service by a man in a suit with a stack of papers thicker than Darius's pride. The next day at 9:14, a doorbell rang that didn't sound like company. I opened the chain. I saw him. Tie, briefcase, calm voice that knows the map from insult to statute. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said. "I'm here to serve an order." I let the chain fall. I told him, "Let the law speak." And for the first time in 2 years, my living room felt like it had my name on it again. I'm Ruth Carter of Oakland, California, and before anybody decides what belongs to me, I write it down. That's the librarian in me. 39 years at the reference desk, teaching folks how to find the page that proves the truth they already knew. When my Daniel was still here, we bought this little one-story off MacArthur with a porch big enough for 2 rocking chairs and Jasmine that tries to eat the railing by June. We signed our names in blue ink at a title company with styrofoam cups of bad coffee, and I took the grant deed home in a manila folder like it was a christening certificate. We paid that note on time through layoffs and stitches and one December where the heater coughed like a smoker, and we wore sweaters inside and laughed anyway. When Prop 13 kept the taxes from ballooning, we sent a thank you letter to nobody. When Daniel got his diagnosis and the oncologist started using the word aggressive like it was normal, our pastor came with pound cake and a printout about living trusts. "Put the house in a trust, Ruth," he said, "so your name stays where grief and government can't play tug of war." So we did, a revocable living trust. Carter Family Trust, trustees, Daniel and me while we breathed, then me, alone, then my sister Velma as successor because she knows where the flashlight lives and how I like my mail stacked. We signed at the dining room table with a notary who smelled like peppermint and ink, and I took the title transfer deed to the Alameda County Recorder's office myself, because if you've ever watched a clerk lose their place in a line of people holding their whole lives, you learn to stand where they can't miss you. I put the recorded copy behind the china, left of the gravy bot nobody uses, and wrote title, trust, tax in Sharpie on the box so future me could put a hand on it without thinking. When the pandemic rolled in like a fog that wouldn't lift, my daughter Naomi called crying from a studio in Emeryville with a landlord who confused masks with politics and a job that vanished between Zooms. "Mama, can we land with you a month or two?" A mother's yes doesn't wear a calendar. "Bring your plants and your patience," I said. She brought both, and a man she loved named Darius who had a smile like a billboard and a resume that used consultant like it was a wand. I made up the guest room with Daniel's quilts, taught them where the fuse box sulks, and wrote the Wi-Fi password on a sticky note because I am not new. The first month was soft. He took the bins to the curb, set up a Roku like he was building NASA, called me Miss Ruth with a politeness that tasted like practice. He fixed a leaky trap under the kitchen sink and bought those expensive garbage bags that never rip, and I thought, maybe this could be something that doesn't bruise. The second month got teeth. He started using phrases like house rules and quiet hours, as if rent came signed on the back of a thank you. He taped a schedule to the fridge with color-coded chores and didn't write his name on any of the bright parts. He corrected recipes my mother handed me in loose script. "You know, Miss Ruth, butter has saturated fat," while eating thirds of my mac and cheese. When the PG&E bill came higher because smoke made air feel like a chore and I ran the AC, he announced to the living room, "I'll cover this one," and gave me a look that said charity is a brand he likes to be seen wearing. He paid it twice that year and started saying my mortgage, like two $60 transfers equaled 30 years of checks with my handwriting on them. You ever notice how entitlement arrives dressed in help? He'd snatch the remote to fix the input and leave it on the arm of his chair like it got tired. He set the thermostat to 68 and declared it the law. He started calling the small bedroom our office and tucking Naomi's pens into jars labeled schedule, like a person can be filed. I kept my mouth quiet and my notebook noisy. Dates, times, what he said, what it meant, the difference between a favor and a claim. Librarians know a pattern before we admit we've alphabetized it. In December, Naomi and Darius did Christmas on the porch with us because the news said every air particle was a negotiation, and I watched him take selfies with my wreath in the background like heritage could be hacked. He wrapped me a diffuser that made essential oil smell like a hospital and called it wellness. I gave him a scarf and the garage code and told myself, generosity isn't a pie. Me getting a slice didn't mean he had to. He got a job managing remote teams that looked a lot like telling women in other cities to be patient on Slack. He started writing emails at the dining table like a stage. When the gardener retired, he announced, "I'll do the lawn," and then paid a kid from down the block in ideas and networking advice. The jasmine got leggy. I paid my own gardener's nephew in cash to reset the line and wrote yard, $40, Ruth in my ledger, because paper keeps better company than pride. I kept up with the person who matters most in a house besides God, the assessor. I paid the property taxes twice a year like a heartbeat, stamped envelopes to the county with the APN on the memo line because there are devils in those 9 numbers if you don't watch them. Every March, the Alameda County envelope came soft and blue like a robin egg. I tucked each receipt into the trust binder in a vinyl sleeve. On the inside cover, I wrote, "If you're reading this and I can't find my glasses, this house is in my trust. See Exhibit A." I made copies of Daniel's death certificate because government asks for grief proof, like sorrow should come notarized. Summer turned the yard to a prayer and the kitchen into a treaty zone. Darius started saying we when he meant me. We decided to cut back on sugar. We don't do TV that late. We need to be better stewards of resources. He started positioning his body between me and whatever I reached for, the fridge, the thermostat, the volume, like male deer do when they want to block a path. He took a call on speaker where someone said, closing in on seed, and then bought a ring light and a mic like he was starting a church. He began to reintroduce me to my own friends at the gate. This is Miss Ruth, he told my neighbor, who has borrowed my sugar since 1988. He used new phrases with Naomi: intergenerational household dynamics, influence of legacy owners, as if my name on paper was a problem a TED Talk could solve. She rolled her eyes once and mouthed, "Sorry," to me over his shoulder. I kissed her cheek with my eyes. I reminded myself she used to be the little girl who taped library date-due cards to her bedroom books so we could play checkout and late fees, and she could learn that time has rules. If you've ever watched someone test a fence in your kindness, you know they don't stop at the rails. One night, he picked up the landline I keep on the wall because cell towers have their moods and said, "We don't need this antique. When the fire knocks the grid sideways, we will," and I unplugged the argument with a smile. He got petty. He put "please" in a sentence like a bullet. "Please keep it down after 9. Please knock before entering the kitchen when I'm cooking." His cooking was an Instapot full of ambition. Mine was a pot of beans that remembered Alabama, even though we left a generation ago. He discovered lodger on some forum and started using it like a magic word. "Under California lodger laws," he said to Naomi at dinner, "we can establish expectations and impose quiet hours." "Under California Hill No laws," I said inside my head, "owners don't become guests just because a man can Google." Out loud, I asked him kindly to pass the cornbread and wrote the date in my notebook with the word lodger underlined, because sometimes ridiculous is foreshadowing. The straw wasn't a bail. It was the way he laid his phone on the coffee table like a badge and said "my" in front of nouns that used to answer only to ours, yours, and we. It was the time he told Naomi, "We need to curate the house aesthetic," and suggested we take down Daniel's photo because it sets a tone of grief. I took it down, kissed it, and put it back up like a metronome that keeps this family on beat. It was the day he told a delivery driver the owner isn't available while I was standing 3 feet away holding a pen. I corrected him sweetly. She is, and she signed with Daniel in 1987 and tipped the driver extra for witnessing my patience. It was the afternoon he put a "no soliciting" sign on my gate without asking, and then flipped the breaker to my back porch light to save cents, and I tripped on the step carrying my own groceries like a punchline to a joke I didn't write. I said, "Turn that back on," and he said, "You're being dramatic." I turned it back on and added breaker, kitchen, porch to my notebook, like a woman who keeps her own flight log, because one day somebody might ask me why the plane stayed in the air, and I'll show them the checks. Next, the thing grief makes of quiet women, a habit of receipts. I photocopied the trust transfer deed and the certification of trust and put a copy in my glove box, one in Velma's freezer bag with the emergency candles, one in a red folder on top of my dresser labeled "In case I'm tired." I scanned them to a thumb drive I wear on my keyring behind the grocery club tag. I printed my last 2 years of property tax receipts and stapled them into the binder. I kept PG&E and EBMU in my name even when he clicked buttons to simplify. I watched the mail like a hawk and put a key aside for the day I might need to open a door in a room that smells like toner and patience. Little by little, my living room stopped asking me what I wanted to watch and began to ask me to negotiate with a boy and his theories. He'd stand in the exact slice of carpet that catches morning sun and cast a shadow I did not recognize. Naomi got smaller to keep the peace. She'd say, "It's fine, Mom," with a smile that never reached any organ, and changed the subject to work, to a recipe, to a series on TV we could fake laugh through if we kept the volume low. The night before he turned off Jeopardy, he'd paused my show to take a call without "excuse me," because respect is a word men with new microphones forget how to pronounce. I wrote that down too. People in court like patterns more than stories. Someone will ask me why I didn't put him out then. Because daughters love the wrong men sometimes, and mothers buy time for their kids to realize it with both cheek and spine intact. Because we were in a lockdown that used the word essential for everything but kindness. Because I thought maybe he'd work his way back to Miss Ruth and mean it. Because I was tired and didn't want to make a scene in front of my own TV. Because conflict taxes old bones, and I was too busy keeping soup hot for the neighbor who lost her sister, and Sunday school on Zoom, and plugging leaks other people's egos punched in my drywall. Because I am black and old and a woman, and I have learned to manage rooms that were not built for me by putting up shelves nobody else will see. Shelves full of proof, and good pens, and spare keys, and the calm that scares boys who believe control is a voice memo. And that happened on a Tuesday that smelled like lemon cleaner and jasmine when he turned off the TV, said the line, and my anger put on her church hat and said, "We'll be back with paper." That's how my house became his, through a series of soft thefts spoken in polite that never learned to say please to women like me. That's how I became lodger in sentences that never went to the records office. That's how my daughter's eyes learned the shape of carpet. And that's how a librarian in retirement remembered where the law stacks live and wrote a plan in a spiral notebook between milk and call Velma. Trust binder and tote, deed copy, tax receipts, notebook with dates and words, keys, pearls, sit up straight, go to the window where the light is good, let paper do what arguments won't. I remember the clue I didn't get to hear, a city of bridges. Because the sound that followed was louder than game show music has a right to be. Click. Black screen. His shadow where my window should be. Go to your room, old woman. This is my house now. The way he said old woman like it was a diagnosis and a sentence. Naomi's eyes dropped to the carpet. You can forgive a daughter for getting small once. You cannot let a man practice on your life. I stood, slow, like a church does when the bride appears, took my keys, my purse, and my quiet, and walked past his body without asking for the hallway. If you've ever left your own living room because a boy played landlord with his mouth, you know the air outside tastes like metal and math. I sat in my Camry, turned on the dome light, and wrote it all down in my spiral. Date, 8:59 p.m., room, living, TV off by hand, words, go to your room, old woman, this is my house now. I added the parts a court will ask before your pride remembers them wrong. Standing distance, tone, who witnessed, what I said, nothing, what I did, left. I texted Velma one sentence, on my way, and drove to a couch that smells like peppermints and old jokes. On her coffee table, under the remote for a TV no man tells her to turn off, I spread my proof like a librarian making a display. Trust certification, Carter Family Trust, trustee, me. Grant deed, recorded, assessor's number inked in the corner by my hand years ago, tax receipts, paid on time, PG&E and EBMUD bills, my name, my address, and the little blue spiral now wearing tonight's bruise converted to ink. Velma poured me water in a real glass and didn't say, I told you so. She said, you want the couch or my bed? I said the couch, because Daniel's quilts still know my shape. I tried sleeping, but insult vibrates like a bad HVAC, steady and petty. So I made a list instead. 1, court. 2, self-help window. 3, elder abuse restraining order. 4, move out. I wrote EARO and then the full words because acronyms don't look a judge in the eye. I tapped a sticky on the trust binder, bring, and put the keys and pearls next to it because my mother taught me judges read better when you shine. Morning greeted me like it had a job. Velma put coffee in a travel mug and said, let the paper speak. And I said, amen. And that was our whole sermon. At the courthouse, I went where poor people and old people go, because it's where the state keeps its heart, the self-help center. The woman behind the plexiglass wore readers on a chain and a face that has seen every insult in this county. Elder or dependent adult restraining orders, I said, like a catalog request. EA 100 to start, she replied, sliding forms through the slot and a clip-on pen that doesn't forgive shaky hands. California calls the thing by its right name. Abuse isn't just bruises, it's intimidation, interference with quiet enjoyment, threats that make a person small in their own four walls. I check the boxes that fit. Harassment, intimidation, interference with daily activities, mental suffering. I wrote his words again in block letters, because courts like when your truth matches itself. I attached Exhibit A, certified copy of trust certification, Exhibit B, grant deed, Exhibit C, property tax receipt, Exhibit D, 2 utility bills in my name, Exhibit E, my incident log with dates and times, Exhibit F, neighbor Miss Alvarez's declaration, handwritten the night before. I heard shouting on prior dates. I saw Miss Carter leave. He often speaks loudly in a demeaning tone. We turned it into the court's form with the help lady's clipboard. Exhibit G, a still from my door camera the last time he got in my face on the porch. Exhibit H, a printout of a transcript from my kitchen echo history catching my house now, because machines keep receipts when men forget. I checked the box for a residence exclusion, move-out order, the one people don't know exists because bullies tell you the house is a feeling and not a title. In California, a judge can tell a respondent to move out of a home shared with a protected elder if the facts fit. I asked to keep my address confidential. The clerk whispered, "Good," like I'd solved her favorite riddle. "You want sheriff service?" she asked next. "In this state, you can get service for free on these orders if you're the right kind of vulnerable and the right kind of brave." "Yes," I said, "sheriff and a private server if the calendar needs it." I filled out CLETS information, so Law had what they needed if he got clever, wrote his full name, height, the scar on his left eyebrow he tells people is from a gym and I know is from middle school, the car he drives, blue Toyota with a dent near the taillight, God bless the truth. I wrote Naomi's name under Protected People Who Live With You, with my heart heavy and my pen steady. I know how women get caught in men's storms. The clerk stamped the stack and sent me to Department 12, where justice wears sensible shoes. In the hallway, a bailiff said, "Good morning, ma'am," like mornings are a promise and not a test. Inside, the judge read faster than a librarian can correct, then slower, then looked up. There is a look good judges have when a thing you brought matches a thing they've seen too much. "Ms. Carter, I'm granting your temporary orders. Residence exclusion is appropriate. Law enforcement may assist with personal effects removal. Hearing in 3 weeks will serve him." The pen she used might as well have been a gavel. The clerk slid me the EA 110, temporary restraining order, and EA 109, notice of hearing, with copies for the sheriff, and a sheet titled, "What to do when served party refuses to leave." In plain language I could have drafted at my desk, because librarians always have a second career inside them. "Take these to the sheriff's civil window," she said. "They'll serve today if they can." I thanked her the way you thank a bus driver in the rain. Sheriff's Civil Division looked like a waiting room and a threat. A deputy with paperwork in his posture took the stack and asked 2 questions that matter. "Weapons?" "No," I said. "Access?" "Yes, lives here. Blue Toyota, noon to 2 he takes calls in the dining room like a stage." The deputy nodded like a farmer about to bale hay. "We'll make contact between 9 and 11 tomorrow," he said. "If he's there now, we can try today. Depends on unit availability." I gave them Naomi's number to coordinate an appointment for property pickup, because even good orders go bad when men return unescorted. Then I went to the locksmith around the corner and made an appointment contingent on the deputy's knock, because a chain is a prayer and a new cylinder is a miracle. Out on 14th Street, the city hummed like it didn't know a boy was about to learn what "my house" means if you never met a recorder stamp. I drove home to a porch that smelled like jasmine and paper. Before I turned my own key, I put the chain on inside, opened just enough to see the life I built waiting for me, and did what tired women do when fury has had its fun. I made soup. Naomi texted at 3:12 p.m. "Where are you?" I typed. "Safe." And then, after 2 tries, "Staying at Aunt Velma's night. Tomorrow, a man in a suit will knock. You are welcome to stay. He is not." 3 dots. Then, "Mom, I'm sorry." The apology had a face and her father's eyebrows and my grandmother's stubborn baked in. It didn't fix anything, but it watered something that needed it. I wrote that down too in the notebook under evidence of heart. I set 2 bowls on the table in case she came home in time to be held by something with salt and heat. Then I put the stack from court in a red folder on my mantel under Daniel's photo, left of the little wooden cross the usher carved for me that Easter our choir finally found the alto line in Blessed Assurance, and I said out loud to the room and to the wide God who has put up with me this long, "I will not be a lodger in a sentence a man with Wi-Fi wrote." The sun slid lower across the floorboards he likes to stand on when he makes announcements. My house listened. My phone buzzed with a caller ID that looked like the county. The civil unit confirmed service for morning. "We'll be there with a process server and a deputy to enforce the move-out. Stay inside, keep the chain on until we identify ourselves." "Yes, sir," I said, and put my pearls on my dresser for tomorrow. You can call it superstition. I call it remembering whose daughter I am. That night at Velma's, I slept like people sleep when they've done their homework. When my eyes blinked awake without an alarm, it was to the kind of doorbells make when they're not asking for sugar, they're asking for scripture. 9:14 a.m. A suit, a stack, a new key and a ring in my pocket waiting for a cylinder that will forget the old story. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said. "I'm here to serve an order." I smiled the way librarians do when you bring back something overdue and say, "Thank you for returning what wasn't yours." At 9:14 a.m., the doorbell made the sound doorbells make when they're carrying more than company. I slid the chain, checked the peephole. Tie, leather folio, a patience you can't buy at a mall. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," he said, voice the kind of calm that tells you this train has a schedule. "Process server, papers for Mr. Darius Hill." Behind him, a sheriff's cruiser eased to the curb, 2 deputies stepping out like commas placed exactly where a sentence needs to breathe. I let the chain fall. "Let the law speak," I told the suit, and stepped back so the hallway could hold what was about to happen. He handed me an acknowledgement to prove the papers had reached the right door, then asked, "Is Mr. Hill present?" He was. The bedroom, my old office he now called content space, cracked open, then slammed, then opened again like pride can't make up its mind. He walked into the living room with that lifted chin that used to impress brunches and does nothing for a badge. "This is harassment," he said before anybody spoke. The suit did not blink. "Temporary restraining order, case ending in 204. He said, sliding the EA-110 through a silence even Darius couldn't interrupt. "Move-out order included. You are restrained from harassing, attacking, striking, threatening, assaulting, hitting, following, stalking, molesting, destroying personal property, disturbing the peace of, keeping under surveillance, or blocking movements of Ms. Ruth Carter. You must immediately move out of the residence at," he read our address like a hymn, "and take only personal clothing and effects necessary until further order of the court." The deputy stepped forward, body-worn camera a small square of truth. "Sir, you'll have 15 minutes to gather essentials. We'll inventory remaining property and arrange a civil standby for pickup within 7 days. Any weapons?" "I have rights," Darius snapped. "Lodger law, you can't—" "You can say that to the judge at the hearing," the deputy replied, tone flat and merciful like a level. "Today, we're enforcing a court order." He turned to me. "Ma'am, you can stand behind me or in the kitchen if you prefer." I took my place on the runner where the afternoon sun falls, pearls cool against my collarbone because my mother taught me to dress for victory like it's Sunday. Naomi hovered near the hallway like breath that didn't know where to land. "I'm welcome to stay," I told her, voice steady on purpose. "This is your home as long as you need it. He is not." Her face crumpled and fixed and crumpled again, a child learning a new map. She nodded once and stepped to my side. Darius pointed at the wall like the paint could take his side. "I paid PG&E twice," he said, as if 2 orange bills were golden deeds. "I handled everything." The process server, who has seen 1,000 men mistake volume for value, offered a pen. "Sign acknowledging receipt, or I'll sign proof of service." Darius scrawled, the kind of signature that thinks paper bleeds. The deputy checked the time. 15 minutes start now, and posted the order on the inside of my door where my rosemary wreath used to hang. Clip, blue tape, the sound of a house remembering its owner. Darius stormed down the hall, talking to nobody and to all his followers at once. "Unlawful. Content. You'll all hear about this. Lawsuit." The deputy followed at shoulder length, narrating like a pilot for the camera. He is retrieving 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, 1 toiletry bag, 2 pairs of shoes, 1 laptop, 1 charger. He looked to me. "Anything else you consider essential for him to take today?" "Phone," I said. "Wallet. Medicine, if he has any." Darius snatched the phone from the side table like it owed him rent. He tried for the TV remote on reflex. The deputy's eyebrow did a whole conversation. "Remote stays," he said. "It belongs to the residents." Darius laughed. That brittle sound men use when their favorite toy gets a rule. "This is my house," he said louder, trying to bully the walls into perjury. I reached for my red folder and set it on the console where the good lamp lives, flipped it open to the trust certification like a waitress laying down a menu. "This house is owned by the Carter Family Trust. I am the trustee. Recorded 2011, updated 2017. The court agreed this morning." The deputy glanced, nodded. The ink saw seal where a mouth had been. Naomi shifted. "Darius." Half plea, half habit. He turned on her a fraction. "You coming?" he asked, not a question so much as a script. She looked at me first, then at the deputy, then at the trust paper, then at her shoes. A long second passed where the whole room decided who it wanted to be. "I'm home," she finally said, small but pointed. That was between them, but also all of us. Darius packed angrier for a beat, flinging cloth like it insulted him. The deputy called out, as even as he watched, "We do not allow damage to property during retrieval." "I'm fine," Darius snarled at the ceiling. The ceiling did not reply. The locksmith knocked at 9:42, toolbox polite. "Ma'am," he said, "civil unit called." The deputy nodded him in. "After he exits," he said. I signed the work order. 2 new cylinders, fresh keys, a receipt to tuck into care beside the court papers, because librarians alphabetize their salvation. Darius re-emerged with a suitcase that had seen more airports than accountability. He tried the last ditch of kings and toddlers, declaring things that are not true. "I'll be back," he said, "with my attorney, with an eviction, with a civil standby appointment if you need to collect further belongings," the deputy finished for him. He pointed at the posted order. "Do not return unannounced. Do not contact Ms. Carter. Do not send messages through third parties. Violations go to jail. Do you understand?" Darius's smile hooked to one side like a man about to post his feelings. "Lawsuits," he muttered. The deputy's face did not change. "Do you understand?" "Yes," Darius said, slow as molasses in January. "Good," the deputy answered, not as a compliment, just a notation. They walked him to the porch, the jasmine brushing his sleeve like a jury. He made the mistake arrogant people always make, turned to the neighbors as if the audience could acquit him. Ms. Alvarez across the way gave him the kind of look women in rent control departments save for men who posture. Mr. Lee on the corner turned his watering hose slightly and let the arc land a foot from Darius's shoe. He lifted the suitcase and went down the steps with less noise than he'd practiced in this house all year. The deputy waited until his blue Toyota's dent cleared the curb, then nodded to the locksmith. "Change them," he said, and the soft sound of screws backing out of old metal gave me a better hallelujah than any choir can hold on key. 2 keys for you, 1 for your successor trustee, the locksmith said when he was done, placing them in my palm like communion. I didn't realize I had been holding my breath for 2 years until I heard the new bolt sit in its seat, solid, obedient, quiet. The deputy peeled the blue tape back and reposted the order on the fresh door jamb, signed his civil standby card, and handed me a copy. Hearing date is on page 1. Will handle any further retrieval by appointment. Do not open the door to him. Call us. If he texts or calls, forward to your lawyer. Don't engage. Add a camera if you haven't. Already have one, I said, and he smiled, just a little, like respect on a layaway plan finally paid up. Naomi said nothing while all this happened. When the last uniform stepped off the porch and the locksmith's van pulled away, she folded herself into my chair like a child who grew up in a hurry. "I'm sorry, Mama," she said, and cried like the onion finally got cut. I rubbed her back in circles the way you rub the back of a baby who thinks hiccups might be forever. "You're home," I told her. "That's the apology that counts." We sat in that aftermath quiet, no male voice filling it with TED Talks. Then I stood up and put my living room back on like a sweater. I took the remote from the side table, set it in the little basket I'd labeled remote 2 years ago that he'd kept forgetting, turned on Jeopardy reruns because a woman needs her questions, and let the theme music crawl back up my walls like ivy reclaiming brick. I walked to the thermostat and set it to 71 because my joints like mercy. I hung Daniel's photo straighter, moved my mother's cross a smidge to catch the light, and slid the red court folder into the trust binder. Under a new tab I wrote in my neat library hand, "Orders enforced." Naomi showered, the door latched the way doors do when they're not listening for trouble. I brewed tea in the chipped blue pot and took my own advice from 9,000 reference desk shifts. Make a copy. I scanned the order with my little home printer, emailed a PDF to Mr. Chen, sent one to my sister Velma with the subject line Hallelujah, and uploaded another to a cloud folder named House Ruth Forever, because death and teenagers like to hide papers, and I'm not getting caught without a second shelf. At 11:07, the group text that used to decibel itself to life with potluck assignments flickered with a cousin's "What happened?" and then got quiet real fast when Ms. Alvarez posted a single line, "Court happened." I did not answer because I had nothing left to prove to timelines. At noon, the deputy's partner called to set the civil standby for Darius's remaining items. Wednesday, 10 to 10:20, he said. 20 minutes, he can take clothes, personal electronics he can prove are his, work tools. No furniture, no fixtures, no documents that belong to the... I repeated it back like a librarian checking out a rare book. 20 minutes, essentials, only. Deputy present, I said. He can call the station if he forgets how to count. The deputy chuckled and said, "You'll do fine," and I said, "I already did," and we both hung up before dignity turned into chit-chat. Naomi padded back into the living room, wet hair, mild sweatshirt, a new spine. "Do you want me to go to Aunt Velma's for a few days?" she asked, reflex reaching for penance. "I want you to sit on this couch with your mother and watch a show at a volume that acknowledges our ears are attached to skulls we paid for," and I patted the cushion next to me. She sat. Jeopardy asked a question about bridges. We got it together. Pittsburgh, and cackled like thieves who stole back what was ours. Around 3, I made chicken and rice and green beans with the bacon your doctor says not to eat, but your grandmother says kept you during 73 when meat was a rumor. I set 2 plates. Naomi ate like grief fell asleep. I washed the dishes without trying to crush the sponge like a throat. At 4, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb except for Velma and Mr. Chen and the sheriff's civil number. At 5, I wrote a sticky for the front of the trust binder. If I land in a hospital, call Velma, call Mr. Chen, call the church. Do not let smooth men invent new rules. At 6, the jasmine on the porch started smelling like home again. At 7, I sat on the steps and watched MacArthur do what it does. Bus breaks, someone's laugh 2 houses down, the world turning without asking my permission or advice. And when the sun folded itself at the edge of the fence, I said out loud to the first star I saw, to Daniel's picture, to my mother's ghost, to the neighbor watering her marigolds with noise that makes a street feel safe, I said, "Go to your room, old woman." The law said, "Sir, get out." I said nothing and everything, and let the ink do the rest. I got there early because librarians believe in spines and schedules. Department 12 waits like a bus station. Metal chairs, cream walls, a bulletin board with flyers for clinics that save lives quietly. I carried the red folder and the trust binder like church ushers carry plates. Pearls on, shoes accessible, heart steady from the way the deputy's knock had sounded like a metronome finding a beat my home remembered. Legal aid matched me with Miss Green, a lawyer who wears her hair natural and her patients like armor. She said, "We'll be fine." She glanced over my tabs with the small smile of a woman who recognizes another woman's system. "We'll lead with capacity, then trust/title, then interference. Defense will try lodger and I paid PG&E twice, and we'll let statute and paper do their jobs." She tapped the top form. "You've got a good record. Judges read like librarians. Pattern first, drama last." Darius arrived 5 minutes late in a shirt that cost more than politeness and a lawyer who smelled like cologne and billed hours. Naomi slipped in behind them, sat on my side. The courtroom clerk called our case in a voice that has seen every version of family forget itself. Carter versus Hill, elder/dependent adult restraining order, hearing on issuance of order after hearing and residence exclusion. We stood when the judge came out, a black woman with glasses and a bench presence that said both "I love rules" and "I remember Thanksgiving." She had everything we'd submitted, plus the deputy's enforcement report and Dr. Rao's capacity letter. She looked at me first. "Miss Carter," she said, "good morning." "Good morning, Your Honor," I answered, because my mother taught me to say people's titles like prayers. The judge turned to Darius. "Mr. Hill," she said, "you've been served with a temporary restraining order with a residence exclusion. We're here to determine whether to issue an order after hearing. I have read the declarations. We'll proceed by sworn testimony. Everyone will be respectful." She raised an eyebrow at both lawyers. This room runs on her tempo. She swore me in. I raised my right hand and felt Daniel's ring on its chain warm against my chest like backup. Miss Green walked me through what we built. "State your name, Ruth Carter. Age, 67. Do you live at this address? Yes. In what capacity? I am trustee and beneficiary of the Carter Family Trust. The trust holds the title to the property." She handed certified copies to the clerk, who walked them to the judge. Excerpt 1, Certification of Trust, and Excerpt 2, Recorded Trust Transfer Deed, Miss Green said. The judge glanced, nodded. Ink and seal in the right places calmed her face the way hymns calm sanctuaries. "Describe the incident on," Miss Green prompted. "I stood between him and the window light," I said, looking at the judge, not at him. He turned my TV off with his hand. He said, "Go to your room, old woman. This is my house now." He used the phrase, "my house," 4 times that week. He called me lodger and wrote house rules that included quiet hours and no TV after 9 in my living room. He told a delivery driver the owner isn't available while I was standing beside him holding a pen. He used intimidation to control the space. I left, wrote everything down, and filed. Miss Green marked my spiral notebook pages where I'd printed the single page for the court. Excerpt 3, Incident Log, she said. She offered Miss Alvarez's declaration. Excerpt 4, Neighbor Declaration. She offered the deputy's Civil Standby Report. Excerpt 5. She offered the kitchen echo history printout from the night he said the sentence like a throne. Excerpt 6, and even Darius's lawyer swallowed at the sight of his client's voice on paper. Go to your room, old woman. Timestamped 8:59 p.m., underlined by a machine that heard as well as I did. Miss Green pivoted. "And capacity, Your Honor," she said, handing over Dr. Rao's letter. Excerpt 7, assessment dated last Thursday. Miss Carter demonstrates intact memory, judgment, and decisional capacity, no cognitive impairment. The judge read, set it down with a gravity that landed like a cornerstone. Capacity moots the lie bullies like to tell about elders, she's confused, and makes room for the truth. He is convenient. Any prior incidents? Miss Green asked. Yes, I said, and I did not decorate it. He interfered with my quiet enjoyment, standing between me and the thermostat, unplugging my porch light, telling me to keep it down at 5 p.m., snatching the remote to fix the input, and leaving with it, calling our small bedroom our office and declaring it off limits, posting house rules without my consent, speaking to me in demeaning tones, telling my daughter we decided to curate my home. I kept my anger braided tight enough to hold the facts. Librarians shelve even as they burn. Miss Green asked, "Have you ever given or transferred ownership to Mr. Hill?" "No," I said. "The trust has owned the property since 2011. I pay property taxes and utilities. I allowed my daughter and Mr. Hill to reside there during the pandemic. They paid some utilities. They did not pay rent. It was a revocable permission, not a tenancy." The judge's pen did its little purr on the page. The note-taking judges do when they've heard the right nouns. "Any firearms in the residence?" Miss Green asked. "No," I said. "Any threats of physical harm?" "Verbal intimidation," I said. "Posted close, used his body to block my path to the remote and thermostat. No strikes, but he moved the air wrong in my home." The judge nodded like a woman who has lived a life. Miss Green sat. The judge turned to Darius. "Mr. Hill," she said, "you may cross-examine Miss Carter." His lawyer took over because men who talk like podcasts need counsel to make their noise follow rules. "Miss Carter," he began, "isn't it true my client paid utilities on multiple occasions?" "Yes," I said, "twice for PG&E. My excerpt shows I paid property taxes, water, garbage, continuously." "Isn't it true you invited my client and his wife to live with you?" "Yes," I said, "during a pandemic, as my guests. Invited does not equal surrender ownership." He floated lodger. "Under California Civil Code 1946.5, he said, trying to get the phrase into the air where it would look like a balloon and not the lead that it is. The judge cut in, not unkind, just precise. "Counsel," she said, "this is not an unlawful detainer. We are not in the landlord-tenant department. We are in an abuse restraining order under Welfare and Institutions Code 15657.03. Miss Carter is over 65. She alleges conduct that disturbs her peace and interferes with her quiet enjoyment. The legislature authorized residence exclusions in appropriate elder abuse cases. You may argue notice in another form. Today is about safety and dignity." "Objection, Your Honor," he tried, gamely. "Overruled," she said, like a metronome. The lawyer recalibrated. "Miss Carter," he ventured, "did you ever raise your concerns directly with my client before seeking court intervention?" "Repeatedly," I said, politely, then firmly. He responded by repeating my house and house rules and lodger and quiet hours and turning my TV off in my own living room and telling me to go to my room. I decided to let the law speak. He tried, "You benefit financially by excluding my client." "I benefit physically, emotionally, spiritually, and legally," I said, and the courtroom clerk bit her inside of the cheek to keep from smiling. The judge's pen moved again, the small rasp that sounds like order. Naomi, called by the defense, was harder than law. They asked her, "Do you want your husband to come home?" like it was a fair question. She looked at me, then at the bench, and chose the kind of truth that makes a grown woman proud and sad all at once. "I want my mother safe in the house she built. I want quiet that isn't fear. I want my husband to learn the difference between we paid PG&E twice and we own your mother." The judge thanked her like a daughter who deserves a better script. Darius took the stand and performed. "We were establishing boundaries," he said. "We had a plan to buy the house from the trust." "We did not," I said softly. The judge raised her hand. "One at a time. Do you have any writing to support an agreement to transfer ownership?" His lawyer shuffled papers that had never existed. "We have none today," he said. "Then don't pretend," she said back in judge. Darius tried, "I was protecting my wife." He tried, "She watches TV too loud." He tried financial elder abuse by overcharging utilities. Miss Green blinked slowly in the way cats do when your foolishness tires them. "Your Honor," she said, "we have the bills." She pointed to my excerpts. "Miss Carter paid them. This is not an accounting grievance. This is about disturbing the peace of an elder in her home." The judge leaned forward the way mothers do when they're about to cut the cake and you better have your plate ready. "Mr. Hill," she said, voice like a careful knife, "there are houses in this state and there are homes. Houses are wood and paper. Homes are where the people with the paper get to be brave. You will not use words like lodger to shrink a woman in her own living room." She turned to her clerk. "Prepare EA 130, she said, the order after hearing. 5 years, she added. Full stay away, residence exclusion, no contact, no texts, calls, emails, third-party messages, social media tags. Stay 100 yards away from the residence and Miss Carter's person. Firearms prohibition. Surrender any within 24 hours. Proof of surrender within 48 hours. Civil standby for property retrieval as previously scheduled or as set by Sheriff Civil. No negative contact with daughter at the residence. If she chooses to stay, that is her choice. If she chooses to leave, that is her choice. Violations are arrestable. Fees waived. Each party bears own costs." She looked at Miss Green. "Attorney's fees?" Miss Green shook her head. "Pro bono, Your Honor." The judge looked at me. "Miss Carter, keep your trust and deed copies where you can reach. If anything changes, health, living situation, update your successor trustee and your powers of attorney. You did the right thing." She looked at Darius. "Mr. Hill, you may pursue any property claims in the proper forum. You may not attempt to return to Ms. Carter's home absent a civil standby for retrieval. Do you understand?" He said yes, the way men do when they finally realize no is not the same as negotiation. "Good," she said, snapping her file shut with the finality of a librarian shelving a book past due for months. The clerk handed me copies stamped with the court seal and the words that tasted sweeter than pound cake. "Order after hearing granted." The sheriff's CLETS form got filed, so dispatchers know who's who if 911 ever meets my living room. Ms. Green leaned in. "We'll email you PDFs, she said. "Print 2 for your binder and put 1 on the fridge under that photo of Daniel looking stern." She'd seen my house. It made me like her more. Darius's lawyer did the professional nod. Darius did the Instagram shrug. Naomi squeezed my hand like a woman who will one day teach her daughter what to do with a red folder and a son-in-law who uses the phrase "my house" like a spell. We walked out into Oakland's sun that understood paper. On the courthouse steps, Ms. Green gave me the minute of free education she thought I could use. "People misuse lodger a lot," she said, "but lodger cases belong in landlord-tenant court, not here. And even if he'd been a textbook lodger, elder abuse restraining orders can run parallel and take precedence or safety is at stake. You did excellent documentation. Incident log, neighbors, devices. Judges don't love drama. They love dates. Also, trusts are not just for rich folks. You and Daniel were wise. Librarians like praise that feels like a citation. I nodded and tucked the order into the red folder under Exhibit Orders Enforced. We stopped by the sheriff's civil division to hand them a copy for the file. The deputy who'd stood in my hallway smiled in the way professionals do when good paper met their day. "If he violates," he said, "call us." "I'll call you," I said, "and bring cookies if my oven is hot." He laughed. "Bring the cookies," he said, "but call first." At home, the air had remembered my name. I hung the EA 130 on the inside of my hall closet door, top left, thumbtack through the seal so it wouldn't slip. I scanned it into my House Ruth Forever folder, sent one to Velma, one to Mr. Chen, one to Naomi's email titled Read This Like Gospel, and slid a paper copy into the trust binder under Exhibit Orders, after moving my mother's cross half an inch to make space, because if the saints taught me anything, it's that altars adjust for new mercies. Naomi brought me tea without asking sugar. We both sat on the couch we almost gave up to theory and watched a rerun at a volume that admitted a woman's hearing doesn't have to apologize for existing. Ms. Alvarez knocked with congratulations disguised as a Tupperware of arroz con pollo, because this block runs on food and paperwork. We ate a bowl at the coffee table and said little like people whose quiet finally works. I called the locksmith to add one more key for Velma and updated the sticky on the binder. If hospital, call Velma, Mr. Chen, church, then Naomi. Bring trust and EA 130. At dusk, I stood at the window where the late sun makes a rectangle on the rug and decided rugs do not hold grudges. I rolled it up, beat it on the porch rail, laid it back down facing east, like a prayer. Then I picked up the remote, put it gently in the basket that says Remote, Ruth, on my cheerful label, and turned the television on to a show that I don't have to defend. The question was about bridges. Answer? What is Pittsburgh? I got it right and laughed so loud the jasmine waved. If you want the law in one sentence, it's this. A judge turned his "go to your room, old woman" into "respondent, you are excluded from the residence," and wrote it down where even the walls could read it. The rest is enforcement and tea. The civil standby happened on a Wednesday that smelled like cut grass and new paper. At 9:58 a.m., the deputy knocked exactly like a metronome. At 10 a.m., he walked Darius in with a clipboard and the kind of courtesy that doesn't move for tantrums. 20 minutes, he said. Clothing, personal effects, work tools you can prove are yours. No furniture, no fixtures, no house documents. You'll sign the inventory on exit. Darius eyed the TV, the dining table, the rug with my grandmother's initials in the corner like he could bluff jurisprudence into objects. "That lamp," he began, and the deputy tapped the order with his pen. "Residence property," he said. In the bedroom, he tried for the printer, "My office gear," and the deputy asked for a receipt. He didn't have one. He tried for the cast iron skillet with the perfect seasoning you cannot buy. "Household good," the deputy said. He tried for the remote on instinct and stopped himself when he saw me looking from the couch with the smallest smile a woman is allowed in a moment like this. He packed t-shirts, jeans, the ring light I'd prayed never to see again, his laptop and charger, a pair of dress shoes, and a soft bag that wished it were a briefcase. "Time," the deputy called at 10:20, and outside on the porch, he signed a line on the inventory sheet that said very little and everything. "Any questions?" the deputy asked, neutral as a level. "You'll be hearing from my attorney," he muttered, which is a sentence men say when they learn ink beats volume. "He'll have to file in the right place," the deputy replied, then turned to me with professional kindness. "Ma'am, call us if he returns. The CLETS system is updated. Install a camera if you haven't. Send any messages he tries to reach you with your lawyer. Do not engage." "Already done," I said, and meant it. When the blue Toyota taillight dent turned the corner, the air inside my chest found a new square footage. I closed the door, ran my fingers over the fresh brass of the new cylinder, and laid my palm flat against the wood like you do when you bless a child. Then I went to work not on courtrooms, but on rooms. I took the remote from its exile and set it in the basket I labeled Remote Ruth in cheerful letters, made tea in the chipped blue pot, and walked the perimeter of my house like a librarian counting spines after closing. I straightened Daniel's photo till it caught the light, put my mother's cross a thumb width higher where evening makes a halo, and unrolled the rug that had learned a new place to lie. I reset the thermostat to 71 because joints are voters here. I plugged the porch light back in and swapped the bulb for a motion sensor LED that laughs at darkness. I moved the "no soliciting" sign to the recycling and put up the better sign, the one my pastor's wife gave me, that says "Love lives here" in a font you cannot yell through. Then I sat at the dining table with my trust binder and my red order folder, and I rewrote the rules of this house in ink a judge could read and a grandchild would understand. I added a laminated card to the inside cover of the trust. If I am hospitalized, call Velma, successor trustee, call Mr. Chen, attorney, call Pastor Joe, church, call Naomi, daughter, bring trust certification, EA130, ID, medical list, do not allow any person not on this list to help with papers. The house is in the Carter Family Trust. I am trustee. I scheduled an appointment with Mr. Chen and updated the trust. Velma as primary successor, Naomi as second but with a spendthrift clause to protect her from any future man's venture. I added a simple occupancy agreement for Naomi so that her right to stay does not depend on my mood or anyone else's. I initialed a residence exclusion notice on file letter to OPD, so if a new officer ever squinted at the doorbell camera footage, my file number would meet their uncertainty. I signed a springing power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and an advanced healthcare directive with Velma as agent and Naomi as alternate, because feelings are honest and emergencies are impatient. I filled out a POLST with Dr. Rao so strangers don't guess at the end with the same confidence men guess about who owns a living room. I called the county assessor and confirmed the mailing address and homeowner's exemption are still correct, then set a calendar reminder for property tax semi-annuals, like I have done since 1987, because Prop 13 might keep some wolves at bay, but wolves read ballots and bills equally. I removed Darius from every point of contact, PG&E, EBMUD, Internet. I printed changes and paperclipped confirmations into Utilities, Ruth, on the right side of the binder, where future me has trained her hand to find them at midnight. I reset the Wi-Fi and changed the SSID from the cute name my grandson picked to something that makes a tech support person smile, Trusty 5G, because truth can be tidy. I enabled USPS informed delivery so mail cannot gaslight me, set up credit freezes with all 3 bureaus, because men who feel evicted get creative, added trusted contacts at the bank who pick up the phone and know Velma's voice, and put Naomi on my mint plant, not my mortgage. I sent Mr. Chen a PDF of the EA-130 stamped and filed. He replied with a thumbs up and a sentence, "You did that," which is the exact right amount of applause for a woman who doesn't like parades. That afternoon, I made a house covenant to replace the paper he called rules. I wrote it on one page and taped it to the inside of the pantry door, because pantry doors hear secrets and keep them. In this house, remote controls return to their basket. Quiet hours are about kindness, not control. Volume levels are set by ears that paid for hearing. Laughter is encouraged at decibels that frighten Jasmine into bloom. Thermostats are set by joints with decades on them. Please is a promise, not a leash. Elders do not disappear into rooms because boys are uncomfortable with women on couches. Guests are cherished and kept safe. Women who apologize less are applauded more. Naomi read it and laughed through fresh tears, then nodded like her body had found a map. We practiced new rhythms without a narrator. At 5, I turned on Jeopardy because habits are holy. At 5:27, I turned the kettle off because tea doesn't sip itself. At 6, Naomi and I ate rice and chicken and green beans, and the last of Mrs. Alvarez's arroz con pollo, because communities mix recipes when they love each other. At 7, we sat on the porch and named the flowers we could see without moving. Marigold, jasmine, bougainvillea, somebody's front yard roses that need a fan club. And for the first time in 2 years, she spoke a full sentence without glancing at a hallway. "It's quiet," she said, confused like a noise was late. "That's the point," I said. "Quiet on purpose, not quiet under threat." I used the quiet to plant permanence. I mounted a door camera and set it to record every time a man with a new idea walks up my steps. I put a tiny chime in the hallway and set it so Naomi knows doors open in ways that are choices, not surprises. I added the deputy's number to my favorites and titled it Sheriff Soft in my phone so I wouldn't hesitate to call. I created a noise folder in my email for any text that tries to slither past the order, and a rules folder labeled Law That Loves Me for the PDFs that keep breath in my ribs. I took the EA-130 to the senior center and made 5 copies, dropped one in their clinic file under my name so any social worker that ever meets old Ruth Carter knows what court already said, and signed up to teach a Tuesday session 2 weeks from now. Receipts, records, respect. How to document disrespect and let paper talk. I printed a checklist to hand out. Keep your trust and deed where you can reach them. Write down dates, times, words when someone tries to shrink you. Tell a neighbor you trust. Self-help center knows your name. Elder abuse TROs exist and can include move-outs. Locks rekey, cameras record, copies to your binder, your sister, your church. Miss Green from Legal Aid promised to stop by and answer questions about Section 15657.03 and how disturbing the peace isn't poetry, it's a legal phrase that fits in a judge's mouth. I put 2 folding chairs on my porch that face east in the morning because I like to watch a day begin without an essay about where I belong. I watered the jasmine at dusk and told it out loud, "We live here," the way you tell a child a story until they start finishing the sentences. I took the house rules he'd taped to my fridge and laid them gently in the trash. In their place, I taped emergency numbers: Velma, Mr. Chen, Pastor Joe, Miss Green, Sheriff Civil, and a note to myself that reads, "Do not negotiate the obvious." I opened a savings account titled House Maintenance, so Joy doesn't have to argue with budgets when the roof gets an idea. I put $20 in it and promised it company. I bought fresh white socks because elders forget that grace starts at your ankles. I slept in my bed with the door open and the hallway light off because safety and dark are not enemies in a house that knows your name. Naomi started therapy the next week with a counselor at the Women's Center who understands what happens when love comes with lectures. I paid the copay without telling her because some generational wealth looks like someone else picking up the phone bill without a speech. She moved her plants back to the window like they'd been waiting to photosynthesize without permission. The women from church cycled through with salads and questions, laughter and practical offers, rides, light fixture help, setting up bill pay on my iPad so my knees don't have to win arguments with bus drivers. I let them help because refusing help out of pride looks a lot like handing control to loud boys rehearsing law on your couch. One Saturday, I taught my first clinic at the senior center. I walked in with my binder and the red folder and my pearls on my throat and said, "I'm a librarian. I like rules you can find on a shelf. Here's where the shelf is." We practiced writing facts in steady pens. We practiced saying, "Your Honor," like we meant it. We practiced not over-explaining. I told them the most radical sentence I learned this year: quiet ink is louder than loud men. When someone asked, "But what if he calls you cold?" I said, "Let him. Cold is what tea becomes. Law is what papers get when they mean it." We made a copy line and a tea line, and the same people stood in both. On my way home, I dropped a copy of the EA 130 at Pastor Joe's office and one at Velma's, and I slid another into a Ziploc under the front porch mat taped to the boards, because I am my mother's child and redundancy is a love language. The first time a third-party message arrived, a cousin's "Darius says, can he pick up his speaker tonight?" I snapped a photo and forwarded it to Mr. Chen with one word: noise. He replied with a tiny gavel and "I'll respond," and I put my phone face down and seasoned chicken, because life gets to keep happening while paper does its job. The first time Naomi laughed so hard she snorted at something a woman on TV said. She clapped her hand over her mouth like an apology was due. I took her hand away. I said, "Leave it. Let the neighbors hear joy and figure out where to buy it." When fall slid over Oakland like a well-worn cardigan, I trimmed the jasmine back from the mailbox and painted the porch rail the same white Daniel had loved. One coat now, one in the spring. I mailed my property tax check with a thank you to the county for stamping things without attitude. I sent Miss Green a card that said, "You and paper saved my lungs," and a pound cake because lawyers who sit in rooms where grief and law meet don't get enough sugar. I tucked a fresh sticky into the binder. "If my hands are tired, this binder is strong." And on a Tuesday evening, with the living room bathed in the kind of light rental agreements can't spell, Naomi leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry it took a judge to teach me what you were telling me softly." "Honey," I said, "some lessons need gavel percussion." Then I turned the volume to the number I like, answered every clue I knew, and let the ones I didn't go by like buses you're not meant to catch. The house remembered me. The law had spoken. And every night when I hang my pearls on the little dish by the bed, I say a thank you to a God who made statutes and jasmine and librarians' notebooks and deputies who knock on time. I kept waiting for the part where I felt mean. It never showed up. What showed up was sleep, the kind that lands without negotiations. What showed up was silence that didn't need an apology. a thermostat that learned my joints, a front door that clicked like a period at the end of a sentence only I get to write. People think the law is loud. It's not. Loud is what boys do when they're losing a room. Law is what paper does when it remembers your name. I thought about that the first Sunday after the order, when Naomi and I set the table with my mother's plates and the good forks, and I didn't listen for announcements from the hallway. We ate in the living room because I decided rules should taste like cornbread and not control. Jeopardy asked something about Supreme Court justices, and I got 3 out of 5 because librarians keep odd company in their brains. We laughed and let the jasmine do her work, and the house took our weight like it had been training for this all along. If you want to know what dignity is in California, it looks like a woman holding her own trust in one hand and a red folder in the other, and deciding she will not litigate her humanity in a living room. It sounds like a deputy reading a move-out order, while a man learns the difference between "this is my house now" and "respondent, you are excluded from the residence." It smells like cut grass and new brass, like caper fresh from the clerk's stamp, like soup that cools while copies print, like jasmine at dusk on a porch that remembers who planted her. Naomi started to fill the air with different sentences. "I'm sorry" turned into "I'm staying." "I'm fine" turned into "I hear you." "Quiet, please" turned into "turn it up," and I obliged because hearing is not a sin. She peeled back habits one by one, checking the hallway before she spoke, lowering her laugh to match a man's weather, and folded them away like winter sweaters that won't see another season. Some nights, she sat on the step with a book, and I watered the jasmine, and we talked about small things on purpose. The neighbor's dog that has opinions, the girl down the block who roller skates at midnight like a metronome, what to do about a light switch that sticks. We left the big things to therapy and church and God. The first time she said, "I'm not going back," she set it into her tea, and we both pretended the steam was responsible for our eyes. She didn't owe me that sentence. It still felt like a benediction. Miss Green came to my workshop at the senior center, and we taught a dozen aunties and grandpas, and a man who kept saying, "I ain't nobody's burden," how to alphabetize their safety. Trust, deed, tax, utilities, ID, medical list, incident log, neighbor statement, self-help center, EA forms, sheriff civil, locksmith, camera, copies in 3 places, binder, sister, church. We practice saying "Your Honor" without apologizing for being older than the bench. We practice writing dates like librarians, month, day, year, and no poetry. We practice the face you wear when boys perform law at you with words they learned on a podcast. We practice letting kitchen devices rat on people as Exhibit A. I told them what the judge told me in her own way. Disturbing the peace is not what music does. It's what men do when they arrange your air for you. The church ladies brought lemon bars, and the senior center made weak coffee, and those 2 wrongs made a right in my mouth. I went home with 4 new phone numbers on a sticky that said, "Call me if it gets loud," and I stuck it in the front of my binder, because community is evidence too, and judges read it in your posture. Darius did what men with performance do when an audience gets small. He sent third-party messages, and I forwarded them to Mr. Chen and named the folder Noise and went back to my chicken. He posted a status about false accusations, and someone who knew me wrote, "Court stamped it, friend," and I didn't have to lift a finger because a stamp is a chorus. He showed up once outside the 100-yard line, testing fences with eyes like drones. The camera caught him, the deputy called him by his file number, and the law reminded him gently that geography has consequences. He learned to spend his temper somewhere cheaper. My porch stayed a mercy. I thought I would be angrier with Naomi for the way she learned to look at carpets. I wasn't. Grief had been charging both of us a tax. The court just showed us the bill. We paid it with copies and kindness and the kind of quiet that doesn't file women in their rooms. We planted another jasmine because the plant that tries to eat the porch taught me something about persistence. We put metal numbers on the post so ambulances and mailmen and a cousin with a pie could find us without sorrow. We marked 20 years since Daniel went home by letting the TV be loud during the balming and not pretending men need silence to be good. We told stories about him to a girl who never met him, and a living room that felt like his laugh still had corners to turn. I updated the trust again because paper is a living thing, and life keeps handing it amendments. I added a line that says, Naomi can live here as long as she needs, and nobody with a favorite TED Talk can rewrite that with a fridge magnet. I wrote a letter to future Ruth that says, if you're tired, this binder is strong. If you're confused, this tab is true. If a boy says, my house, the recorder stamp says, no, sir. I taped that letter to the inside cover so medical staff and social workers and cousins with ideas will read it before they read their own reflections. Then I kept teaching. Workshops, sneaky one-on-ones on porch steps, phone calls with neighbors who whisper lodger like it's a spell they need an antidote for. We turned top 10 lists into sentences you can survive. Keep your papers where you can reach them. Write down dates and words when disrespect happens. A lodger is not a wand. Elder abuse TROs exist. Residence exclusion orders exist. Sheriff's civil unit will stand in your hallway and keep boyish theories from touching your cast iron. Cameras are not paranoia. Copies are not overkill. Churches and libraries still know how to be a city spine. And I learned the sentence I will teach until I don't have breath. Quiet ink is louder than loud men. If you're an elder, especially a black grandmother, which is a job title and a calling the census never measured, and somebody turns off your television in your own living room and tells you to go to your room like you're a guest in your bones, hear me. Do not argue with the hallway. Do not debate the thermostat. Do not try to win theology with a boy who just found a podcast. Take your keys, take your purse, take your papers. Go where the state keeps its heart. The self-help window knows your face before you do. The clerk has a stamp with your name on it if you bring her the right nouns. And the law will teach your house how to say your name back to you. You don't have to be cruel. You can be documented. You don't have to be loud. You can be time-stamped. You don't have to be mean. You can be early. You can wear pearls and sit up straight and let a judge turn old woman into your honor in a mouth that used to say, my house now. The day the 5-year order came in the mail with the court seal, I kissed the envelope like it could feel and slid a copy under the closet thumbtack and another into the freezer bag at Velma's because she insists, and another into the church office because Pastor Joe said, let me be the keeper of a copy, and pastors have been filing our grief and our titles for generations behind doors with brittle hymnals and good locks. The house is quieter than it deserves. The remote lives in the basket where it belongs. The thermostat answers to age and not to arrogance. Naomi's plants turn their silly faces toward the window like they don't know heartbreak or courtrooms. The jasmine makes summer impossible to ignore. Some afternoons, I fall asleep with a book on my chest and wake to the smell of rice and a note from Naomi. I seasoned the chicken. We're eating at 7. Love you. And that is the only notice I will accept in this home. Sometimes, when the sun falls exactly along the rug's edge and the neighborhood kids' laughter bounces off MacArthur, I think about how close I came to teaching my bones they were guests. I think about how one sentence, go to your room, old woman, fell into a notebook and became a petition and became a temporary order and became a knock and became a 5-year restraint and became a climate inside these walls that wasn't fear. I think about librarianship as a doctrine. Find the shelf, bring the right index, cite your sources, let facts do what feelings try to overdo, return what isn't yours, keep what is, and label it gently. Then I turn Jeopardy on at the volume my ears bought fair and square, answer a question wrong with confidence, answer the next one right with joy, and thank a God who invented paper, jasmine, judges who read, deputies who knock on time, daughters who learn new sentences, and old women who keep a pen and a spiral by the remote.